Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Welcome to the presentation on windows, whether they're going to be replacements or new. Brian Knowles is someone I've known since 2011, when Hurricane Irene hit. And my organization put on a training program for builders who felt that they did not have access to the information having to do with water and vapor management. And Brian was in the very first class with Peter Yost, along with Jeff and John Dunbar.
Yep.
And I forget who the fourth person was from Jansen's.
Yep. Yeah, it goes back some time. So, yeah, that was a great program. We all got a con.
You were with the best.
Yeah, Pete is the best for sure.
So, and, Brian has been with Jansen's, and then about 4 years ago, you transitioned over to WW Building Supply in Newfen as what, business development
Outside
manager,
sales,
coordinator.
outside sales and business development.
Okay.
Yep.
So, gonna have Brian take it away. And if you want to fill folks in a little bit more about what we do before we get into what we'll replacement. That's for sure. Sure.
Is it Brian or Ryan?
It's Brian with a B
Got it.
and an I.
Got it.
Yeah, no, thank you for being here and thank you for tuning in. A little bit about my history in construction. I was a builder from the time I was a kid. I used to build skateboard ramps and learned how to construct circular things out of wood, which gave me sort of the intuition that maybe a role in the construction industry was the right thing. And that was when I was 11 or 12 years old. So I sought out an education in architecture, and I left that education to become a builder. Just ROI didn't make sense to me, and I could get a job learning in the field. I worked for 17 years as a field carpenter, anything from carpenter's helper all the way up through on-site project management. After that, I transitioned into a sales role with a local replacement contractor, and basically spent 10 years honing the craft of educating homeowners and making good decisions with their investments in their homes. I spent this afternoon climbing around a local courthouse, measuring for an order of replacement windows going into that building. So in terms of window replacement, I've got the answers, and I want you to, extract the information you need from me here tonight. I've put together a presentation that is kind of a broad stroke, and I'd like to handle questions at the back end of that presentation if we can. So if you can just hold your questions, we'll get to them at the end. There's a Q&A section. So we're gonna get right into this. I give my foot before. So the agenda I put together tonight is so when and why are we going to replace our windows? If you're here tonight, it's the when. You may be thinking why, or it may be the why, and you may be thinking when. One or the other. You're here and you're thinking about it. So we always start by considering the existing conditions. And then we're going to cover that. We're also going to cover the options and benefits, both before and after, and then how to choose an installer. The window comes in a box. It doesn't do you any good until somebody puts it in, and if it gets put in incorrectly, it definitely doesn't do you any good. And then the finishing touches, and that's going to be our Q&A. So when and why? So obvious decay. Windows wear out. A lot of windows, if you drive around this town, there are windows that are older than dirt. And some of them are not decayed at all, and some of them are. and there's a lot of reasons for why that happens or doesn't happen, but in any case, if you have windows that are decayed, things like, breakdown are gonna happen, and things like operation and function are gonna start to not be exactly what we want them to be. So you may be thinking about glass type, and you may be thinking about style, and you may be thinking about function. All these things you should be thinking about whether you are or not, because they all, at the end of the day, are going to be in your wall for the rest of the time that you have your house, hopefully. And that's not always the case. We've seen plenty of homeowners over the years who have put windows in, 5 years later find out they're not the right window for what they needed. So that's what we're going to try to nail down today. There are incentives available. I'm not going to dig too much into that. That's not really my specialty. A lot of times it's up to the homeowner. It's the homeowner's incentive in the end. It's not the builder's incentive. It's not your supplier's incentive. It's the homeowner's incentive. So it's one of those things that I would urge you to seriously consider as one of your responsibilities in this process. Do the homework, understand them, and understand what you need. Partner with your builder to get the information that you need to complete those forms. Or maybe you're lucky and you find a builder that'll do it for you. They are out there. And that'll be in the installer selection part of what we're going to talk about. So everybody talks about savings. So what are we going to save? Savings is a really difficult thing to calculate. You know how much heating oil you used last winter. Do you know how much you're going to use this winter? You know how much it cost last winter or last time you filled your tank, but you don't know how much it's going to cost next time you fill your tank. So cost comparisons from year to year are really difficult. You can do a consumption comparison, and that's a lot more accurate to determine what are you using now and get a baseline to figure out what you're saving later. But I will guarantee you, if you do a window replacement properly and holistically throughout your whole building, you will save money, both in the summer and the winter. But more importantly, you'll be more comfortable. So that's the big deal. So you may be thinking about replacing windows just for the sheer, upkeep of your home. Windows have very delicate, intricate parts. Some windows are wood on the exterior, wood decays, and doesn't last. So in every situation, some situations it does. But at some point, regardless of whether you're comfortable in your home or not, you may just want to keep your home up and refresh it with some new windows. And there's nothing more impactful in my mind than going by an old house with old paint that's clean, that hasn't been replaced, but the windows have been replaced. The house looks like a new house. When you're looking at it from the street driving past, it makes an impact. And it's hard to understand why, but when you have that clean glass and the clean lines and everything is sharp around those openings are what attract your eye to the home, and it can be a really big statement. And so kind of a sidecar benefit to this whole exploration. So when you're considering exterior existing conditions, you have two sides to every window, and on either side of each window, there's 4 sides that hold the window in the wall. Okay, so there's a lot of geometry involved in all of the existing conditions, and they all need to be considered. So the picture I'm showing on the right has some stone veneer on the outside, and then it has some very slim lines on the window. Okay, so there's some very specific styling that's going on there with those existing conditions. The cutaway on the left is showing, a simple anatomy of a double hung window. That's breaking your double hung window down and splitting it apart. It's showing you what's in the middle here, the part that you don't see. And this isn't every window. And trust me, I've been doing this at this point for 30 years. I don't know that I can say how often I've ever seen the same conditions twice. Like, it's not very common that one window on one house is the same as the window next door. And if it is, the existing conditions around that opening probably aren't. But what you can understand is what you may or may not have, and what you have to understand is what you may or may not have. So this window is an old style double hung window with a weight cavity and a line that goes up. There's a weight up here. The weights basically offset the sash so that the sash isn't so heavy to operate. That weight cavity is empty air. That weight cavity in those older windows is typically never sealed. It's not insulated, okay? And that weight cavity exists if you choose to do an insert window. Okay, so do you know the difference between insert windows and full opening replacement windows?
No.
Okay, so let's cover that. So an insert window is going to be a window that's made to basically fit into the cavity and the pocket where the sash on this window slides up and down. So the sash gets taken out, the window frame and all of its goodness stays. So if you have a beautiful ornate trim on the inside, you don't want to touch that. An insert window is really enticing. Okay, but what's important to consider in that situation is that weight cavity, because that weight cavity is still empty and it's still not insulated. And so now you could potentially put an expensive insert window, brand new, looks great, operates, but the air still gets around it. And you haven't really made an impact, you haven't gained on those savings, and you've kind of not gotten the full breadth of what you're set out to do. The other thing is about, anatomy of window. Double hung windows, casement windows, there's some casement windows out there where they crank out and they open more like a door. Awning windows open from the bottom. You have tilt turn windows that pivot. So there's a lot of different types of operators that you can look into or that you may or may not have. Some of those operational windows are fit for insert type windows and some are not. So you have to start considering what you have in order to be able to consider what you may want to do. And it doesn't always have to be the same thing. It can change. So that's that. So exterior facade and trim details are kind of where you're going to want to start. What's the siding? What's the trim? What kind of material is it? What kind of shape is it in? Is the sill of the window and the sides, the edge, the stuff that's on the exterior, is that wood or is it clad? Is the clad in good shape? Is the wood in good shape, right? So if the wood's not in good shape and you're considering doing an insert window, that is something that builders do. But at that point, you're going to start doing more replacement work to the existing frame. And that may start making a case for a whole opening replacement where you're removing the trim, you're removing the entire window, and you're putting a full opening new window in and retrimming. You're retrimming both sides with new material. The whole opening is cased, sealed, and you've done a job as good as you can possibly do it. With the insert can do a really good job as long as that existing frame is in really good condition. So that's where you're going to start examining the condition of those windows. Is going to be on the exterior side because the interior always looks pretty decent, for the most part, comparative to the outside. When you go outside, you start to really see where things are missing. The wood's soft, there's rock on the sills. At that point, a lot of times it's really not worth it to go through the expense of the labor and the little bit of materials that it takes to put that frame back together so that you can put the insert into it. You might as well just pull the thing out. You're not in sidecar, you're not going to see a giant cost difference from insert type to whole opening on the window unit itself. The labor will fluctuate depending on your contractor, but it's not like it's going to cost you more money to get a whole opening new construction window than it is to get an insert window. It's just not the case. And most manufacturers now provide insert style windows that have historical styling to them. So if you have historical considerations in your replacement, you can still get an insert window that'll meet those needs. And you can get it from, most of the manufacturers out So now you can look at the interior, the trim, the stain, the paint. And you can do both of these things without taking anything off. You don't have to dissect the wall. You don't have to really do any deep digging. But interior trim, is it stained? Is it painted? Right? And how does that relate to the type of window you want to put in the wall? Because again, you can get an insert window that has wood all over the inside of it. You can get that bare. You can get it, you could stain it on site to match your existing trim. All those things are possible. Or you can just redo the whole thing and change your style completely. The world is really this thing. So next is the wall construction. This is something that you're probably gonna curtail into your installer selection process. So installers that want to dissect a wall before they start a project, that's a pretty good sign that they're thinking on your behalf. If they're just gonna like show up day up and tear your wall apart, you're gonna pay more than they told you. It's just the way it's gonna go. So things to consider when you're interviewing contractors. Are they planning to come back? Do they want to take the wall apart to really examine what's in there and how big the windows that get ordered are going to be so that they fit properly? And also, what's the condition of the framing? Because sometimes when the wall, when the siding comes off, the wall is rotting. And if you didn't know that ahead of time, it can be painful on the back end of the project to be, faced with extra expenses you didn't plan for. So envelope profile, which gets a little bit more technical, but you start to consider envelope profile impacts the conditions in the home. What does it smell like? What does it feel like? Is it moist and dark, or is it, well lit and dry? What are those conditions? Do you add humidity to the house, or do you pull it out, actively? If you don't do either one of those things, you're living comfortably, or maybe you're not that comfortable and you're just living with it. But the envelope profile is basically what your wall is made up of. So it's your windows, it's your drywall, or your wood paneling, and your exterior siding, it's your insulation, it's all the things that keep those things dry or don't keep those things dry. A lot of old homes in Vermont don't have the protection that modern walls are built with. So at that point, the wall profile, the envelope profile, becomes a consideration when you're replacing windows, because the windows are just a part of that. The rest of the wall may be important too. So something you really want to think about, and something you, again, lead the builder, test them, see what they know, and see what they think about, and see what their thought is in terms of what's going on with the walls. So yeah, existing window frame, we talked about this one, I jumped ahead a little bit. So again, the sill, the frame, what kind of shape is it in? Is it even fit for an insert window? That's kind of where you're making that determination whether you want to do an insert or whether you want to do construction. And the existing rough opening. And the biggest thing, and this is where a lot of times I get involved, the relationship between the window frame and the rough opening is the distance between that frame and the framing lumber that holds your wall together. Okay, so the wall's held together by studs and blocking and all different kinds of things, and the insulation's between those. And when you get to a window, the rough opening is the shape that's framed around the window that's in the hole, right? So the relationship between the window and the frame, every manufacturer is going to call out what they want for space between their window and the frame. And it's important to understand what the frame is doing inside that opening, because when you put a new window in it, it got sized for that opening, and it needs to have the right amount of space. And that can impact a lot of different things. Some of the things it's going to impact is on your siding, your exterior cladding, where that line is, that line may need to change because the rough opening on the existing structure is further out, and the new window coming in sits in a different place in its relationship to where that facade is. And if you have stone veneer on the facade, oh, that's an issue. So the window needs to be sized to fit that stone facade, and then work's gonna have to be done on the inside to accommodate. So a lot of different things to think about depending on what your cladding is. And again, your installer should be right on top of this stuff and have an open discussion about it. Last, and I mean, this is, in the end, we're all doing these things for ourselves, right? I mean, the concept of saving energy and the concept of doing right by, by our home and the way that it functions is important, but we're also, we're creatures of our habitat. We want our habitat to be just so. So think about really, really deeply about what you like and dislike about what you have. And make that list. Do the Benjamin Franklin with it. It's really important to consider both and understand both, because that's going to guide that decision and make that decision on what to put in the opening that much easier. So considering options and benefits. So a lot on this page, all different kinds of patterning and detailing, and pretty much, again, across the board, window manufacturers are going to provide all this stuff. You can do any of that stuff, depending on what type of window and what line of window you're going to select. So don't limit yourself when you're thinking about putting a window into saying, oh, we just have 6/6 grills, that's what we're going to go with. But they may want to do something different. That's something to think about. Things like the way the windows operate. So not all windows are built the same, not all windows operate the same. Go to your friends' houses, check out how their windows work, ask them if you can actually open and close one and see, and talk about the differences. What you're going to run into when you're selecting a window is you can get all the information you want online, but that doesn't give you any touch and feel for how the window actually operates. The next step, go out, go to a showroom, see the products in the showrooms. Most of the showrooms in this area, whatever brand you're seeking, you're going to be able to find a showroom with that product in it. When you go into that showroom, really touch and feel everything, play with it, mess around with it. Is it jiggly? Does it operate smooth? Is it difficult to operate? What's the chance that the parts and pieces are going to have longevity or not? Really think hard and long about those things, because those are the things that you're going to be touching and feeling for the rest of your experience. And again, they don't all operate the same. So there's, again, a lot of things to think about. So interior and exterior materials. Everybody wants no maintenance. No maintenance doesn't exist. Sorry to burst your bubble. But low maintenance does, and longevity does. Longevity is definitely out there and easily attained, but it does come down to the product that you select. It has a little bit to do with the installation, but on exterior cladding, the product that you select is super important. So understanding the differences between ratings on paint. If it's an aluminum clad is painted. So you're going to select a color, that's a paint. And the rating on that paint is going to determine what kind of lifespan it's going to have before it gets chalky and before it fades and doesn't look the way it did when you bought it. So certain ratings are going to give you more longevity, and talking to somebody that knows about that is a big help. There's just a couple of architectural ratings. So AMA 2605, AMA 2603. So two very different longevity spans in those two paint ratings. There's a lot of homework to do. All you need to know is go for the one that's got more, because it's going to last longer. And that's anything across the board in the investment of replacing a window that adds to the longevity of the product is worth it every single time. Your existing or your windows may want to be fiberglass. They may want to be wood. All those options are available. Vinyl is also available. And all those different windows look and feel and touch and offer different options. So all that exploration is out there. And again, this is all stuff that you can see in a showroom. So take the time and go see your local supplier and get to know them. So stationary or fixed. I've seen a lot of people who have windows that have always operated, but they never operated. You're going to pay 30, 40, depending on the size, sometimes even 50% more for a window that operates than you are for a window that does not operate. Okay, so you can replace a window, make it look like a double hung window, just by the way that you put the sticking, you know, the lights, the light cuts, you can make those light cuts look like a double hung. So next to your other double hungs, it looks like a double hung, but it's actually a picture unit that doesn't open and close. So a lot of those design options are things that people never consider, and they just spend more because that's what was always there. So something certainly to think about. So back to the question, insert or full frame, and we ran down through sort of the pros and cons and how to, I would say, how to funnel yourself down through what's appropriate and what's right, what's the right application for your fit. So glass type's something that there are a lot of different factors, there are a lot of different ratings, there are a lot of different assemblies that all offer different types of performance. Some let more sunlight in and allow you to heat your home passively during the winter more effectively. Some let less light in and don't allow you to do that as much. Sometimes people will actually choose different glazing packages on the sunny wall than they choose on the shady walls just for that solar gain in the wintertime. You're probably going to want to have shades or shade trees for the summertime months when you're getting too much heat in the house. But you can balance that more effectively than having a window that doesn't let any heat in the winter. Because at that point, you're just paying for heat that you're not getting from that glass. So those glass types and those ratings, again, any of your industry professionals are going to know what glazing package is right for you. I'm not going to go through all the details and specs of those ratings because you're just going to glaze over. It's just, I've never left one of those presentations feeling like I learned anymore. So we're going to leave that out. Just let the professional talk to you about what glass type you want based on what your application is, and you'll be able to get a piece of glass in that window that's going to do what you need to do.
So, well, before we move on, so can you get glass that looks the same visually, but you know, like in different parts of your house, you don't want your glass to look differently.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know?
Yeah.
But you're like, oh, here is where I want the sun to come in and the heat to come in, and there I don't. My question is, should you get your whole house with the same? Choose the one and go with the one, or can you do different ones?
So no two exposures are ever going to look the same anyway, right? Because they're getting the sunlight differently.
Mm-hmm.
So if the sun's glancing against one window but hitting another one directly, those two pieces of glass aren't going to ever look the same. Right. So at that point, it's, you know, and there may be a slight color tone looking out, and that's probably something you want to think about if you have, you know, a room with two different facing walls.
Okay.
And I mean, you can obtain glass samples, and you can literally just put them in your window just to see, and it'll show up. You'll see those differences. Trim details. So a little prelude to our contractor selection. Not all windows installers are built the same. Not all builders are built the same. There are a lot of guys out there that you wouldn't necessarily find in a query for window replacement contractors because they're more fine line carpenters, but they're really good at replacing windows, right? And they do it the right way. On the other side of that, there are a lot of window contractors that just do windows and should be theoretically the experts. When you start considering things like trim details, that's a really important part of important piece of the conversation because it's going to tell you, if you ask the right questions, it's going to tell you, is this guy just putting a piece of glass in an opening, or does this guy really want to like dress my windows up and do it right? When somebody comes in and looks at ornate trim details like are in this room and doesn't consider them in the process and doesn't have an open discussion with you about that, he's looking to put a piece of glass in the wall. So something to definitely make sure that it's part of the conversation. And exterior and interior trim details are important. And if you're doing a whole opening replacement, you're replacing them. So you have an opportunity to change that. And it's really, you know, the price, the impact on price when you talk about changing one style from one style to another isn't always that big. When you're making the investment to change the trim, you might want to do something more special than just, you know, flat casing. There might want to be moldings, or there might want to be steps, or there might want to be a sill on the window. Maybe you want to extend the sill so you can put plants in it. You can do all those things now because you have the opportunity. You're going to have that whole opening to the frame. Divided lights. Do you have them? Yes or no? Do you know what they are?
Thanks.
Yeah. So you have a few different types. You know about that?
I know that others are stuck in and they fall out and shut the window too fast.
Real
Okay.
ones.
So applied grills, and you have.
I don't have any at this point, but there's the real ones and the fake ones.
Yes.
Fair enough. Yeah. So simulated divided light, true divided light, right? You have grills between the glass. Okay, so they're between the two panes of glass. And then you have applied wood grills or applied vinyl grills, depending on what kind of window you have. So all those different assemblies, and obviously, you know, the grills along the side, you see there's all the different patterns that are available. But yeah, important considerations. What does that look like? What's between the glass? Is the glass separate panels? A lot of times nowadays, you're not getting true divided lights in the window. Unless you're really in the upper echelon of price point. It's a really special order, you know, I don't know, it's just that they don't do a lot of them. So you're getting simulated divided lights 9 times out of 10, and you're gonna have a grill bar on the inside, a grill bar on the outside that matches it, and you're gonna have a spacer bar in between. Okay, so that's a simulated divided light. And then the ones between the glass, they do the same thing, but they look, you know, it's easier to clean, is what everybody says. So if that's important to you, that's an option. Then your design choices. So a window shape, you know, is it gonna be a bay window? Is it separated into parts? Do the parts do different things in terms of opening and closing? What makes the most sense for the way that you want that opening to function? I always say, if you're gonna take a window out, just imagine that opening is empty and doesn't have anything in it. And then you can get to the point where you can actually see, oh, I can make that 2 windows. Or I can make that in 1 whole window and not have anything breaking up my view. Or I can make it 4 windows, whatever you want to do, right? But if you're just looking at one that has 3 in it, like these windows do, then don't get locked into the fact that those are 3. You might actually benefit both interior and exterior from a design standpoint and function standpoint just by considering that. It's just another thing to think about. So the all-encompassing, choosing your installer. So this is something that I spent a long time, you know, learning about, as part of my role was to be the guy you wanted to choose, right? But the fact is, it comes down to really simple principles, and it comes down to a process of just essentially, you know, working through who's really, you know, the guy. Because if you're just looking at prices, the decision is not getting made based on the right categories. And you could spend more than you should have and get a product that wasn't as good as the guy that was a little bit less. And vice versa, you could spend less than you should have and get a product that's nowhere close to what you wanted. So super, super, super important to go through the process with at least 2 or 3 around here. I mean, you know, a lot of the guys are good around here, and, you know, lucky enough, we live in a small community where we know a lot of the guys already, and that helps a lot. But when it comes to the install, some guys are really good at one thing and not good at others. Some guys are passionate about one thing and not passionate about others. That's important to evaluate. So also availability. That's a big one right now. Nobody's available. You guys know. It's really difficult to lock someone in. People ask me all the time when they're coming in for a window or a door, do you have somebody that installs it? Oh, you don't install? No, we're a lumber yard. We don't install windows. I have a lot of guys that, you know, come to me that do install windows, and maybe some of them are available. I'm a good resource for that, for a lot of reasons. I know who's doing good work and I know who's doing bad work, but also I know the guys and know whether they're trustworthy and know whether they're gonna take it for a ride or not. So their professionalism is also, you know, is obviously key. Professionalism comes down to a lot of different things. You know, the way they dress and present themselves is one thing. The way they conduct themselves on a job site is another. And when the job site is your home, it's really important. Because it's your home, it's your space. And if someone's on your property and not conducting themselves professionally, that's gonna make for a really long experience. And we talk about the word experience. This is an experience, make no mistake. You're going through an experience to replace your windows. You're gonna have contractors in your home and outside of your home, and it can be really fun. And it can be really joyful, and it can be really easygoing. And it can also be the opposite of that. So experience goes a long way. I'm going to kind of brush through this really quick. Experience, insurance, online reviews. Let's just talk about experience and insurance. So an experienced contractor's been around for a long time, but an experienced contractor may not have been in business for a long time. There are a lot of guys out there that are parting ways with the companies that they've worked for a long time and starting their own company. They could be a brand new company and you don't know anything about them. They don't have any reviews, right? You don't know them, or maybe you do, but how do you know if they're the ones to do the job? Well, talk to the guy they worked for. Sometimes the way they parted was amenable. And sometimes that builder will actually say, he's perfect for you. These are the reasons why. Come look at some of the work he's done. Those are resources that are out there, and those are doors that aren't going to get closed in your face. And you know, definitely routes that you can go down. I see a lot of guys locally that have broken off. They just said, you know what, it's time. I've been doing this for 20 years, working for somebody else. I can, you know, make more for my family if I'm doing it myself. Sometimes I can, sometimes I can't. But the fact is that, you know, there's a lot of talent out there. And it doesn't just mean somebody that's been in business for 100 years all the time. Sometimes it's, you know, somebody who's done a really good job for a long time and has gotten really good experience along the way. Because you have, on the other side of that, you have a lot of guys who have done a bad job for a long time and haven't learned anything along the way, but they have all those years of experience. That's out there too. So the online review thing, so there's pros and cons. Online reviews, you know, my take on, if I'm going through an online review, it's like, read the goods, read the bads, and really, like, read the tone. Read where it's coming from and what it's saying, and then compare it to the others. And ask questions. There's usually, you know, a spot where you can respond and ask questions depending on the forum you're on, but online reviews are a really tricky place and probably not the best source to really hedge out when you want to work for you. Recommendations and referrals are. So recommendations and referrals are paramount. because it's someone who's already had that experience with that person talking to you about that experience, right? So that's a really simple question. Can you give me a couple referrals? Do you have any of your past customers that wouldn't mind me giving them a call to talk about how their experience was? They're going to give you their best ones, right? But, you know, good. Like, let's see how it went, and maybe you can find some more on that trail. With the shortage, I shouldn't say shortage of labor. I think per capita, we probably don't have a shortage of labor, but per capita, we have more work going on than our labor force can handle. That's the way I see it. So all of us say we need more labor, we need more builders, and that's a slippery slope, because things go up and down. When we have too many builders and things go down, it gets really messy. But local versus out of state comes into play right now because of the fact that we do have a lot of work going on and only so many people that can do it. And so there's a lot of local guys sourcing out of state labor. Okay, that's in play, and not a bad option. It's definitely worth a really hard look, but it's not a bad option. I've seen a lot of impressive work coming from guys who don't live in this state that have been sourced from guys up here that just can't fulfill their work. So something that's out there that can actually help maybe advance you in your schedule. Local guys are great. We all know them, like we talked about. But again, out-of-state labor has an entirely different experience. They also build in an entirely different climate, because you can go an hour south and the demands on a building and the demands on a window and the door are completely different than they are up here. So that's something to consider too. How much of those guys know what's going to be the specifications and the scope of work that are going to cover me for my climate zone? What kind of glazing do I want to pay to make sure my windows perform and provide me the energy savings I'm looking for? At the end of the day, if you don't have a written proposal to look at that tells you exactly what that builder is going to do and is not going to do, stop. Go find somebody who will give you one. If a builder's too busy to put together a proposal for you, he's too busy to be your builder. It's as straightforward as that. And the reason that I say that is because we call them contractors for a reason. They're going to execute on their contract. If their contract is on a piece of paper and it just says replace 16 windows for the price of $16,000, what else is happening here? Is the interior trim taken care of? Is the outside taken care of? Is it an insert window? Is it a full replacement window? What kind of window is it? All these questions are not answered. So when you go to the court of law and you say, hey, my guy stiffed me, the judge is going to go, did he put 16 windows in your house? And you're going to be like, yes, he did. Well, it looks like he did exactly what he said. So proposal contract, clear as a bell. It has to be laid out clear, and it's going to have a lot of pages and a lot of information that takes some time to digest, but most critical part, because like it or not, replacing windows has probably more complexity than a lot of other home improvement things that you'll undergo in your lifetime. It's just one of the most complicated things to do well. And that's kind of the gist of what picture in here. So cost versus value. Cost versus value is going to get hedged out through the experience you have talking to the contractor. You're going to start to realize that one guy's going to provide something and I can count on that, and another guy, I'm not sure. Right? There's some value in knowing. That's why we pay for insurance, right? You're never going to use it, but you pay for AAA, right? Things like that. So cost versus value starts to get balanced out by asking all these questions and talking to these builders and really getting to know them before you actually sign on the dotted line. Cost versus value has a lot to do with everything that I've gone through already. So all those choices, build, value, or deplete it. And the cost is probably going to stay similar, right? It's these decisions and choices that you make in the end, on the grand scheme of things, on the big number on the bottom line, when you pay that final bill, all those little choices that you had to make along the way, those aren't the ones that flex the money up and down that much. The guy that did it, who gave you the price at the beginning, that's the one who determines how much it costs in the end, right? So is he providing the value that he gave you in his estimate, or she gave you in her estimate? And how do I know? And so proposal contract, cost value, you gotta have a picture painted clear as well for you. So I put this little tag in here. Every window that you can buy on the market is going to have this tag that's set in the back. I put it in the back for a reason, because I'm not getting into ratings. I'm not going to do it. So I will go through. There's visible transmittance. You were talking about how much light is let through, right? And that's relative to solar heat coefficient. And the other one behind there, what's that? Got it. No. Okay. And then the U factor is a rating in the thermal performance of the building, overall thermal. So that factors in the frame performance, that factors in the glass performance, and the overall assembly performance, right? So U factors on the same size opening for a casement window that just has one sash that opens and closes like a door against a four-sided gasket, versus the same size window as a double hung, which has two different sash that slide back and forth that don't necessarily close with the same pressure against them, right? Those two windows from any manufacturer are going to rate differently. And the double hung is not going to rate as well. And that's just the way it is. It's really hard to make a double hung window. Same thing with a sliding door. Sliding doors are notorious for having a little bit of a gap where those two rails meet, because it's really hard to get a perfect meeting joint there. There's a lot of design and a lot of brands of windows and doors that take this into account and do a really good job of making it work, and you'll get a better new factor for it. And so those little numbers are important to consider at a certain point. But at a certain point, if you've done your due diligence and you've picked a manufacturer that you're certain of, those numbers are going to be secondary. You're going to look at them, they're going to be what you want them to be because you chose the right manufacturer. So that's that. So
Brian, just with the 35, you put 35. Why don't you just explain, is that a good number or a lower number? What are the numbers that you should be looking at?
So 10 years ago, when I was selling window replacement, the Fed got involved and basically said all windows across the industry need a U factor of 0.33. None of us even knew what that meant. We didn't know what it stood for, what it represented, what test was used to figure it out. We just knew that the window had to be 0.33. So all the manufacturers said, baseline for all windows is now 0.33. We can't make anything less. This is what it has to be, right? That has evolved into, now we have Vermont state guidelines for our energy code that are requiring ratings that are even better. Now, when the ratings get better, they go down. So a window with a 0.25 has a better overall performance rating than a window with a 0.35. Okay, so you're looking for a lower rating on that scale. And this is going to be in the links, the Energy Star links, all that stuff. You guys can do your homework on that. That's why I kind of said I was going to leave it alone. But the website, the Energy Star website, is a great resource. And then I'll show you a couple of different pages that I pull up just to sort of go through and familiarize you guys with that. So in the end, you're doing a project, you're going through this experience. What are your measurements for success? So thermal resistance improvements that you make need to be felt. Like, if you did a window project properly, when it's done, you will notice the difference. I haven't had a homeowner where the install went well, the product that they chose was good, and at the end they didn't say, man, it's made such a huge difference. We don't even hear the cars on the street. Reduced sound transmission that can be heard. That's a thing. your windows, more commonly than not, get a lot of sound through them. And it is so nice when you live next to a road to all of a sudden not hear the road anymore. Things that you don't always consider because you just live with it all the time. And it's just, it's what do they call it? Olfactory sensories. Anyway. So enhanced function that enables the use of outdoor air. So this is a big one for a lot of people. People who had windows for years that didn't open and close. And they just never, they opened the door and they got a little breeze through the house, but they were never able to actually open the whole house up, right? All of a sudden you got these brand new windows and all of them just right now, and all of a sudden you have all this air and you feel like you're in your house, but you're outside at the same time. And man, in the rainstorm, it's awesome. So that's a big measurement of success. The balance of the original design of the home with modern trends. Okay, so there's a lot of modern trends out there. A lot of people are doing different divided lights than what they currently have. A lot of people are modernizing the farmhouse. The old Vermont vernacular architecture is getting this new lift in its being, and this new evolution of its persona, based on the fact that people are changing their windows and making conscious design decisions that still balance the original design of the home. So step back and look at the house from a long way away and look at the way the windows relate to the facade and the shape of the house. And think about that when you're laying out the way the windows are going to look, because you can make really, really inexpensive and highly impactful decisions that will just add to the glory of your house. And then obviously, you're out to save energy and live more comfortably. And again, those two things, I've not seen a window installable properly where those two things weren't measurable. They weren't absolutely definitively noticeable. So if you guys have questions, we can do that. If you guys want to leave emails, I can send you these links so you can take them down. They're pretty lengthy. You can start your query just at energystar.gov. So information about the federal incentive, okay, and how to get some money back out of the project after you've done it. It's not before, it's after. And that's a really sort of wishy-washy way of describing how that value is added up over the scale of your project. I think the important thing to understand is you're not going to get the windows to pay for themselves. If you add up the savings you got and take it away from the cost of the installation, it's not. And then add 10 years of fuel consumption onto it, and the difference between what that was and what the 10 years previous, you're not going to get them to pay for themselves. There's not 100% ROI on window replacement. So the costs and benefits that we talked about earlier, those are the ones that are really the big difference makers. And to be honest with you, you put new windows in your house, and it's kind of like getting a new car. Like, you drive that new car off the lot, it doesn't rattle. The doors close up and tight. Everything works. It smells nice. Like, that's the kind of thing when new windows will do to a whole house. The Vermont State Performance Criteria, so that's a big one. Your builder should understand that. A lot of them don't necessarily keep up with it. They do and they don't. I shouldn't say that. The information about the changes in the Vermont residential energy building standards is very lengthy and moderately difficult to understand. Where it comes into play for you guys is, one, what's the rating on the windows, right? And how are they going to perform? And does that meet the standard guidelines that the state has set for windows in my home? And that's going to be different in remodeling and replacement than what is required for new construction. And you can go, further than what the requirements are, as long as you're making decisions that don't impact the way that that window performs in a negative way. So like, for example, if you have moisture in your home and you select certain glazing packages, those glazing packages will functionally keep the interior pane of glass colder, which will allow it to generate condensation sooner. And so all of a sudden you never had condensation on your glass before. That's because the glass was getting heated up effectively. Now you're not heating that glass effectively anymore because you have, high low coatings on the outside, and that interior glass is colder. All of a sudden that interior glass becomes like your bathroom mirror after you take a shower, because there's moisture in the home that's constantly moving. So those little things are important to consider, and it's important to sort of ask about that and see who knows about it. Because there are a few of us that, but the criteria is out there for you guys to check that out, just to make sure that we do follow line. You'll find most windows that do follow line. I haven't had too many window specs that have been called out based on the new state guidelines on a new construction build and call out a certain factor for the window. And I go through and I spec that house of windows out. And then, like, I haven't had a situation where I had to go back and change those windows in one way or another to get a better view factor. Most of them are coming out of the box in meeting the guidelines, is what I'm saying. So it's not like you have to do all kinds of special stuff. Typically, the standard glazing package and the standard frames on most windows are gonna make cut the date. So that's all. Questions?
Yeah, I'll show you a picture.
Okay.
Everyone can look. Let's see. This is what half my windows look like, the bottom. So it's in between the two panes of glass.
Oh, yes. Yes, so
Residue?
that's a seal failure.
What causes it? It's in between the two.
Oh,
The vacuum, is that the problem?
So to explain that for the viewers, so the fogging on your windows that you can't clean off,
Right.
what happens to make that a thing is the two panes of glass in your window, and it only happens on dual pane windows, but the two panes of glass on your window are sealed at the perimeter by an aluminum bead that keeps that pocket airtight. That pocket is filled with gas, and the glass is coated with a gas. So you have these coatings and you have this gas in this assembly, and as soon as that assembly is no longer sealed, it allows oxygen to enter the science experiment. And that does two things. One, it impacts the relationship between the gas and the coatings. Okay, so that'll cause the coatings to start to bleed and change color.
Mhm.
That's one thing that happens sometimes. But also, you'll see the change in temperature and the change in moisture between that glass. And once moisture gets in there, it's just gonna fog every time the temperature changes, and then it goes away.
Right, this stays the whole time. It's almost like a mineral coating.
Yep. So that's where you have
And there's
gaseous
no
coating.
way to replace the windows.
Yep. And if they're, if they've got dual pane glass, then they're probably suitable for an insert application, which saves you, the expense and the time to do the cladding, the trim and
Except for when your trim is rotten.
then you want to take care of it. So yes, you have a quandary.
I have two
No.
questions.
How old is your house, Diane?
I think it was built in the mid to early 80s. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
and I think it was definitely, the houses that you go out, you head west after Saxon's River, there's a bunch of houses on the left
On the
near
flat.
the river.
Yeah.
Those were all built by the same builder, and then, so it was sort of like, I'm gonna truckload of windows that are not highest quality. Here they are, here, and then this house was sort of, he built it for himself, but it's all these sort of leftover average material.
Yeah.
That.
And sometimes, I would say there's still plenty of that type of product available to you. and that's, I think, the big thing, when you're considering who and what and when and all that stuff, there are still plenty of windows out there that will do a good job for 5 years. There's some that do 10, and some that go, long past their life cycle. And some of the modern advancements in technologies have impacted that in a way that is different than historical. So historically, Windows would almost or just make it past their warranty period. And now we're seeing there's products on the market now that are exceeding their warranty period, just because of the relationship between the materials is more stable. So things like that, are definitely considerations. And what's out there in the field, and what do you see, and what's been there for a long time, it still works. I mean, they all start to, need a little help. I'm not going to say there's not much out there that's going to last forever. And the impacts that your environment has on them is going to change that. So, but yeah, that's the 80s, so they're pushing 30-something years old. It's about right. It's unfortunately about right.
Go ahead.
What's the questions?
Yeah, so my questions are first, is it most cost effective to have all your windows done at once, or can you do a couple this year, a couple next year?
So, contractor's hat, you're going to save money by having the contractor come, set up, and do the whole job at once, as opposed to do that 5 times or 4 times, right? Because each time the contractor shows up and sets up the job, the cost is the same, whether he's doing a quarter of the job or whether he's doing 100% of the job. So yes, that's probably the biggest chunk of savings that you're going to realize by diving in all the way and doing the whole project. There's other things, so you may not be able to get the same window type or color, or like these things go by the wayside all the time. There might be I'm aware of a recent color that was canceled and is no longer made. And it was one of the most popular colors in New England. New England was the only market that bought it in the whole country. So they don't make that color anymore. And guess what? Everybody has it. So now, these people with this color, and they know they love the windows and check the boxes, and they can't get the windows in that color to finish off the rest of the house. It's groovy. But yeah, so.
And my other question is about doors.
Yeah.
I have a lot of doors with single pane windows, and can I just get the last replaced as a double pane?
Depends on the door.
Part of the reason I ask is because they're odd sizes. If I go and look for a door, the standard, it doesn't match the standards.
Yeah, and you're pretty free to roam in terms of sizing nowadays. The way things are manufactured now, modern window and door manufacturing has gone away from standard sizes. When you go to the lumber yard that stocks doors, they're going to say this is the size we have. Doesn't mean that's the only size you can get. And there's a lot of variables depending on what type of door it is, what the manufacturer is, how they construct their door. You get into the anatomy of a door instead of the anatomy of a window. Some doors can be cut down to fit. Some doors you can just order. It might take a little bit longer to get it, but it'll come into the size that you need it. So I would say too, there are very, very few doors out there for me that I would repair versus replace. The amount of love and craftsmanship has to go into repairing a door and do it in a way that you wouldn't know it was done. lends itself to a similar cost structure as just getting a door. On top of that, an old door that's been repaired and replaced is very, very infrequently going to come even close to the performance of a new door. And that doors also carry a U factor and a design pressure rating, and all of those things are critical. Because at the end of the day, swap the glass, and it's like the tighter you make it, the pressure is still there, right? So, if you take a nozzle on a hose that's this big and it's got water coming out of it, and you make that nozzle smaller, the water shoots harder and can make more erosion where it's hitting, right? So thermally in a house, you have the same kind of pressure from inside to outside, depending on the factors and depending on the season in our case. So when you're funneling that pressure in by swapping out the glass on a door, now you fix the glass on the door, but the other pieces and parts of the door now have more pressure on them. And because they're old, they're probably, probably more noticeable than they were. We may have like more wind coming through that door. Even though you have better glass, you're getting more air. And as Peter Yost says, air leakage is the biggest. That's when I first learned that air leakage is the primary source of heat loss in a home. Air leakage.
One more question. My windows fit tightly, but I can't open them because there's no screens. So,
Okay.
there are screens, but there are storm windows,
Yep.
but I can't remove them.
Yep.
I don't know why exactly. I haven't totally given up on figuring them out.
Yeah.
I mean, I just bought this house last week, so. Can I just get screens?
I'll answer this with a maybe. You would need somebody to come see you and have a look to see if a screen can be fitted.
And that would be a window contractor that I would ask about that.
That could be. You might find a contractor that would do it. These days, I don't think a lot of contractors are gonna follow up on that kind of work. I would say you probably there are screen companies that's what they do. So that's out there. I mean, I custom make screens for people all the time. Through our manufacturer, they will make a screen whatever size you want. Whether that screen is going to work with your window, I don't know until we were to look at it. So that's I guess the answer to that. If you have storm windows on it, that's something you need to consider though, because the storm windows are making a difference in the way they.
Yeah, the storm windows do make a difference.
Yeah, and I mean they make a difference in a way that is a whole other discussion, but yeah, some things to think about.
So I'm gonna give a comment about screens. I love having my doors open. They're just wide open, no screens. We get so few bugs in our house. The only times we make sure to keep them shut is it's sort of that really humid, like black fly sort of weather, or in the evening, like 7 p.m. Other than that, the windows are open. We have so few bugs that enter. And I just wonder if people think that there's more bugs coming in than there really are.
It's the birds. The birds.
We have not, okay. Though that would be different.
Have you had birds come in?
Only when the cat carries them in. But, no, and I mean, we do. I'm not saying we don't get bugs, but we'll have a dragonfly or a bumblebee or something
I get
wander
bugs
in. And if you just turn out the lights, they find the light and they fly out.
Yeah, well, it's not the bugs.
Right.
Anyway, but
Right.
I've heard mid around your windows and doors will deter almost every insect there is. I haven't tried it, so I don't know for sure.
I had a question about window longevity. We have an old house with vinyl replacement windows for Janswitz put in probably 30 years ago. I mean, they still work. One or two of them are really hard to open and close. Should we be thinking about replacing them all? How do you know when they're failing?
So feel, you know, in the wintertime, when you feel cold, what's the threshold for when the glass really starts to get cold? Your comfort level, you know, those are, I think, the main things you would start to consider. If you wanted to dig into it deeper, you can do a home energy audit and get some infrared pictures of the house, and it's, you know, on days when it's really cold outside and the house is getting heated and vice versa, to see what's going on with the windows and see what kind of, you know, kind of temperature differences there are. We can measure how they're performing, you know, against what a new window would perform like. But that would be a deep dive, and probably the only way to really answer that question. And there's plenty of local companies that'll do that for you. And again, I mean, getting into the Energy Star stuff, just for fun for a second. So this is the website. I had a couple of tabs on it. So the first question is why Energy Star? So I just want to cover that. So Energy Star does the ratings on the windows, and they're basically going to have the sticker on the proposal before you buy a window. It'll say, is it Energy Star rated? And if so, what is the rating? And it'll put it, you know, if it's suitable for your climate zone. Okay. So that's sort of first and foremost foundation. From there, they're going to provide you all the information you need to, you know, look into the performance stuff. And they're going to talk about, you know, a home's overall performance and relationships to everything in your home in regard to that performance. So Energy Star appliances, Energy Star is everywhere. So it's, you know, a really deep website with a lot of information. But like, you know, I just hit this link here. So because windows, doors, and skylights, and you know, this is what comes up. And so the incentive, and you can hit the website here, learn more about that. You go down here and select your product category, and then from there it's going to give you all the different, any manufacturer you want to look at, or all the manufacturers, and it'll tell you what, you know, ratings are for the type of unit that manufacturer has. Now there's going to be hundreds of lines for each manufacturer because each manufacturer has hundreds of different options, right? So like you can go for days and days and days on this thing and find out all the useless information that you want. Some of it is useful. And so obviously knowing about the incentives and how those apply to you and how to capitalize on them, that's a big one. And then knowing about your northern climate zone window criteria, that's another thing, right? So you have that benchmark for success and what they're expecting windows in their climate zone to be. From there, you've got also a good resource, guys, Efficiency Vermont.
Yep.
And Efficiency Vermont will lead you to plenty of contractors that can do a home energy audit for you. And in fact, home energy improvements, there are other incentives that go along with those that are available, and that research is available on that website. But that starts with an audit. Those improvements are measured by a pre-construction audit and then a post-construction audit. And most of the time, if you're doing a pre-construction audit, they're going to give you a scope of work and a list of priorities and what to expect for differences in your home's performance. They'll also say, hey, you know, these things are happening that aren't good. This is what you're going to want to do soon to fix those things.
Okay, Go ahead, I just.
Could you talk a little bit about why someone should have wood windows, or is it wood vinyl, or is there a third option?
Yeah, so in terms of the exterior, so there's gonna be, different from interior to exterior.
Can you get two different types?
You can.
I did not know that. Okay.
You can get an aluminum clad window with a wood interior.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you can get a vinyl clad window with a wood interior. You can get a fiberglass clad window with a wood interior. And all the constructions from all the manufacturers are different. And, all those things are important to understand if that's the window we want.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't care about seeing wood inside, you can do all vinyl, all fiberglass. There are all aluminum windows out there.
My house had them from the early 80s.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you don't have aluminum. They would get ice buildup on the inside.
Yeah. And the modern aluminum extrusion window assemblies have improved over that. And that's what you see in storefronts. Any storefront you go by, most of them are going to have an aluminum extrusion frame with a piece of glass in it. So those are things you can do. So yeah, basically, I guess it comes down to what you like and you want to see inside, and then how you want it to finish. If you want stain, because you have stain, then wood interior window is a priority.
Mm-hmm.
If they're painted, it's not, because in most cases you can get fiberglass, and even vinyl. A lot of vinyl manufacturers will provide a painted window, or they'll provide solid vinyl that's colored. It's usually limited color choices, but they are available.
Can you paint vinyl or fiberglass?
I would never recommend to do it in the field. There are guys that'll do it, and I don't think you get a painter to guarantee it for more than a year.
Okay.
It's just the variable conditions. Paint, a factory applied paint is done in a booth with the right volumes. It's all scientific and it's measured, so they're not over or under applying. They're doing it in the right amount of coats, and a lot of times they're heat drying it, which causes a totally different, cure. So, doing that outside in the field is not going to happen, and it's not going to last. Yeah. I also will tell you, windows and doors move, open, close, get bumped into. They take the brunt of the abuse. So anytime you're painting over a surface or a substrate, consider what that substrate's going to look like if you scratch the paint.
And so, is there argument for having wood on the outside, besides that you can paint it?
Little to none. If you have, there's plenty of homes that I've seen that have big long overhangs where the wall never gets wet. So in a situation where the wall literally never sees moisture unless it rains sideways like this afternoon, once or twice a year is one thing, but like it could rain every other day of the year and that wall is bone dry. In that case, you can use a wood window, and they're beautiful. And the options that you can design and detail wood window with are magnificent. They are really expensive, but they're true to historical accuracy. But they need to be protected, and by that I mean protected by the law, not protected by code.
Brian, I have a question. We're in Rockingham. We do the window drip dresser, and I think it would be helpful to learn from you. You don't want to be in a position of overselling window drip dressers when there could be a bit bigger problem. So could you give sort of the pluses and the minuses, the things that we need to be careful of when we're talking to people about should I go with a window dresser?
Yeah, I would say so. The really simple analogy would be when the car you're driving needs a repair that doesn't justify owning the car anymore. Typically, we make the decision to trade it, get as much value out of it as we can, and get another car, and move on and let somebody else who's really good at fixing a car and can do it for a fraction of the cost that we can do that job. In the case of a window, it's not very different, where there are plenty of windows out there that are very, very old, but just don't have the glass to give us the performance and the comfort that we want. In that case, a window dressing, which is, you know, basically a thermal, it becomes a thermal panel, and it's friction fit with gaskets to the inside of the window, fits tight around the frame, and provides a chamber, and it's doing a similar thing that you know, modern two-pane glazing does, just a little differently. It can be worthwhile if there's, you know, nothing else wrong with the window that you're gonna, you know, feel the need to replace. It also is going to come down to, well, you open and close that window a lot, and how many times you're going to take the dressing in and out, and just a lot of things to consider. But there definitely are a lot of applications where it makes a lot of sense. You know, a lot of homes, like it or not, in this area are starting to use AC, use air conditioning.
Oh, yeah.
And so, you know, people aren't opening your windows as often as they used to, despite the fact that we have really pleasant air in the evening. So, you know, I'm seeing more and more people use fixed glass because they want to see outside if they don't want to be outside. That's just lifestyle and evolution, I guess. But yeah, in that case, you know, if you don't care about opening the window, I mean, we don't open the window a lot in the wintertime anyway, so.
We should probably wrap up on some stating.
Well, thanks,
you.
guys.
This is really
No, this was you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry there weren't more, but
I would have been
it was
there.
filmed.
Hey,
Thanks.
thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.